The Aeneid by Virgil. Book 1. Storm and Banquet. I sing of the arms and of the man, fated to be an exile, who long since left the land of Troy and came to Italy to the shores of Lavinium. And a great pounding he took by land and sea at the hands of the heavenly gods because of the fierce and unforgetting anger of Juno. Great too were his sufferings in war before he could found his city and carry his gods into Latium. This was the beginning of the Latin race, the Alban fathers and the high walls of Rome. Tell me, Muse, the causes of her anger. How did he violate the will of the queen of the gods? What was his offence? Why did she drive a man famous for his piety to such endless hardship and such suffering? Can there be so much anger in the hearts of the heavenly gods? There was an ancient city held by colonists from Tyre, opposite Italy and the distant mouth of the river Tiber. It was a city of great wealth and ruthless in the pursuit of war. Its name was Carthage, and Juno is said to have loved it more than any other place, more even than Samos. Here the goddess kept her armour. Here was her chariot, and this was the city she had long favoured, intending it to give its sovereignty over the peoples of the earth, if only the fates would allow it. But she had heard that there was a rising from the blood of Troy, a race of men who in days to come would overthrow this Tyrian citadel. A people proud in war and rulers of a great empire would come to sack the land of Libya. This is the destiny of the fates were unrolling. These were the fears of the daughter of Saturn, and she had not forgotten the war she had fought long since at Troy for her beloved Argos, nor had her bitter resentment and the reasons for it ever left her mind. There still rankled deep in her heart the judgment of Paris and the injustice of the slight to her beauty, her loathing for the whole stock of Dardanus, and her fury at the honours done to Ganymede, whom her husband Jupiter had carried off to be his cupbearer. With all this fueling her anger, she was keeping the remnants of the Trojans, those who had escaped the savagery of Achilles and the Greeks, far away from Latium, driven by the fates to wander year after year round all the oceans of the world. So heavy was the cost of founding the Roman race. The Trojans were in high spirits. They were almost out of sight of Sicily and heading for the open sea with the wind astern and their bronze prows churning the salt sea to foam as Juno brooded, still nursing the eternal wound deep in her breast. Am I to admit defeat and give up my attempt to keep the king of the Trojans away from Italy? So the fates do not approve. Yet Pallas Athena could fire the fleet and drown my Argives in the sea because of the guilt of one man, the mad passion of Ajax, son of Oileus. With her own hand she threw the consuming fire of Jupiter from the clouds, shattering his ships and sending winds to churn up the level sea. Then, as he breathed out flame from his breast where the thunderbolt had pierced it, she caught him up in a whirlwind and impaled him on the jagged rock. But here am I, the queen of the gods, the sister of Jupiter, and his wife, and I have waged war all these years against a whole race of men. Is there no one left who worships the godhead of Juno? Will there be no one in the future to pray to me and lay an offering on my altars? These were the thoughts of the goddess turned over in her burning heart as she came to Aeolia, the home of the clouds, a place teeming with the raging winds of the south. Here, Oileus is king, and here in a vast cavern he keeps in subjection the brawling winds and howling storms, chained and bridled in their prison. They murmur in loud protest round bolted gates in the mountainside, while Aeolus sits in his high citadel, holding his sceptre, soothing their spirits and tempering their angry passions. But for him they would catch up the sea, the earth and the deeps of the sky, and sweep them along through space. In fear of this, the all-powerful Father banished them to these black caverns with massive mountains heaped over them, and gave them under a fixed charter a king who knew how to hold them in check, or, when ordered, to let them run with free rein. It was to him that Juno made supplication in these words: I come to you, Aeneas, because the Father of the gods and the King of men has given you the power to calm the waves of the sea, or raise them by your winds. A race of men hateful to me is sailing the Tyrian Sea, carrying Ilium to Italy, along with Penates, their defeated gods. Whip up your winds, overwhelm their ships and sink them. Drive their fleet in all directions and scatter their bodies over the sea. I have 14 nymphs of the rarest beauty, and the loveliest of them all is Diopea. I shall make her yours and join you in lawful wedlock. If you do me this service, she shall spend all her years with you and make you the father of beautiful children. To this Aeneas made answer: Your task, O Queen, is to decide your wishes. My duty is to carry out your orders. It is thanks to you that I rule the little kingdom and enjoy this sceptre and the blessing of Jupiter. Through you I have a couch to lie on at the feast of the god, and my power over cloud and storm comes from you. At these words he struck the side of the hollow mountain with the butt of his spear, and the wind seemed to form a column and pour out through an open gate to blow a hurricane over the whole earth. The east wind and the southwest, with squall upon squall, fell upon the sea at once, whipping it up from its bottommost depths and rolling huge waves towards its shores. Men shouted, ropes screamed. Clouds suddenly blotted out the light of the sky from the eyes of the Trojans, and black night brooded on the sea as the heavens thundered, and lightning flashed again and again across the sky. Wherever the Trojans looked, death stared them in the face. A sudden chill went through Aeneas, and his limbs grew weak. Groaning, he lifted his hands' palms upwards to the stars and cried, Those whose fate it was to die beneath the high walls of Troy with their fathers looking down on them were many, many times more fortunate than I. O Diomede, bravest of the Greeks, why could I have not fallen to your right hand and breathed out my life on the plains of Troy, where fierce Hector fell by the sword of Achilles, where great Serpentine lies, and where the river Simios caught up so many shields and helmets and bodies of brave men, and rolled them down its current. Even as he threw out these words, a squall came hurling from the north, catching his sail full on and raising the waves to the stars. The oars broke, the prow was wrenched round, and as they lay beam onto the seas, there came towering over them a sheer mountain of water. Some of the ships were hanging on the crests of the waves. For others, the waters opened, and in the troughs could be seen the seabed and the seething sand. 3 of them were caught by the south wind and driven off course onto the river, hidden in mid-ocean. Italians now know it as Altus, a huge spine of rock just under the surface. 3 of them, the southeaster, took and carried helplessly from the high sea onto the sandbank of Sietes, ran them aground and blocked them in with the wall of sand before the very eyes of Aeneas. The ship then carried the faithful Orestes, and the Lycians were struck on the stern by a great sea, and the helmsman was swept away head first into the water. 3 times she spun round on the same spot till the swift whirlpool sucked her down. Here and there men could be seen swimming in the vast ocean, and with them in the waves their armour, spars of wood, and the treasures of Troy. One by one the stout ships of Aeneas and the brave Achates, then Abas and old Aletes, succumbed to the storm. The fastenings of the ship's sides were loosened, The deadly water poured in, and the timbers sprang. Neptune, meanwhile, observed the loud disturbances of the ocean, the rampaging of the storms, and the draining of his deepest pools, and was moved to anger. Rising from the depths, he lifted his head up high over the crests of the waves and looked serenely out over the sea at Aeneas' fleet scattered over the face of the waters, and the Trojans overwhelmed by the waves and by the rending of the sky. He recognised at once the anger and the cunning of his sister Juno, and instantly summoned the east wind and the west and spoke to them in these words. Is it your noble birth that has made you so sure of yourself? Do you winds now dare to move heaven and earth and raise these great masses of water without my divine authority? I could take you now, but first I must still the waves you have stirred up. For any crimes you commit in the future, you will pay a dearer price. Away with you, and take this message to your king. He is not the one who has jurisdiction over the sea or holds the trident that knows no pity. That is my responsibility, given to me by lot. His domain, O Eurus, wind of the east, is the huge crags where you have your home. That is where Ilus can do his swaggering, confining his rule to the closed walls of the prison of the winds. These were his words. And before he had finished speaking, he was calming the swell, disturbing the banked clouds, and bringing back the sun. Triton and the sea nymph Cymotho heaved and strained as they pushed the ships off jagged rocks, while Neptune himself lifted them out of the sandbanks with his trident and opened up the vast Syrtes, restraining the sea as he skimmed along with his chariot wheels touching the crests of the waves. As when disorder arises among the people of a great city and the common mob runs riot, wild passion finds weapons for men's hands and torches, and rocks start flying. At such a time, if people chance to see a man who has some weight among them from his goodness and his services to the state, they fall silent, standing and listening with all their attention, while his words command their passions and soothe their hearts. So did all the crashing of the sea fall silent, and Father Neptune looked out over the waves, drove the horses of his chariot beneath a clear sky, and gave them rein to fly before the wind. Aeneas and his men were exhausted, and making what speed they could for the nearest land, they set course for the coast of Libya. There is a place where a harbour is formed by an island blocking the mouth of a long sound. As the waves come in from the open sea and break on the sides of this island, they are divided into deep inlets of the bay. Rock cliffs are everywhere. A great pinnacle threatens the sky on either side, and beneath all this the broad water lies still and safe. At the end of the bay there rises a backcloth of shimmering trees, a dark wood with quivering shadows, looming over the water, and there, at the foot of this scene, is a cave of hanging rocks, a home for the nymphs, with fresh spring water inside it, and seats in the virgin rock. Here there is no need of chains to moor the weary ships, or of anchors with hooked teeth to hold them fast. This is where Aeneas put in with 7 ships gathered from all the Trojan fleet, and great was their longing for the land as they disembarked and stepped at last onto the shore and threw their sea-wasted body down on the sand. First of all, Achates struck a spark from the flint, caught it in some leaves, fed the flame by putting it into dry twigs round it, and set the fire going with the brushwood. Then, weary as they were after all their labours, they laid out their corn, the gift of the goddess Ceres, all tainted with salt, and the goddess's own implements, and set themselves to scorch with flame this grain that they had saved from the sea, and to grind it on the stone. Meanwhile, Aeneas climbed a rock to get a view over the whole breadth of the ocean, and see if there was any trace of the storm-tossed Antheus, or of the double-banked Trojan galleys Capys perhaps, or Cacus's armour high on the poop. There was not a ship to be seen, but he did see 3 stags wandering about the shore with all their herd behind them grazing their low ground in the long line. He stopped in his tracks and snatched his bow and swift arrows from the trusty Aeneid. First, he took down the 3 leaders with their high heads of branching antlers. The whole of the rest of the herd scattered into the leafy cover of the wood, but not before he succeeded in stretching 7 huge carcasses on the ground, 1 for each of the ships. He then made for the harbour and gave them out to all his men. Last of all, he shared out the wine to the good Aeneid, with a hero's generosity, had poured into casks for them as they left the shores of Sicily. Then, as they mourned, he comforted them, saying, "My friends, this is not the first trouble we have known. We have suffered worse before, and this too will pass. God will see to it. You have been to Scylla's cave, and heard the mad dogs and howling in the depths of it. You have even survived rocks thrown by Cyclops. So summon up your courage once again. This is no time for gloom or fear. The day will come, perhaps, when it will give you the pleasure to remember even this. Whatever chance may bring, however many hardships we suffer, we are making for Latium, where the fates show us our place of rest. There it is the will of God that the kingdom of Troy shall rise again. Your task is to endure and save yourself for better days." These were his words, but he was sick with all his cares. He showed them the face of hope, and kept his misery deep in his heart. His men went hastily to work, preparing the coming feast. They flayed the hide off the ribs and exposed the flesh. Some cut into quivering slices and speared it on spits. Others laid out cauldrons of water on the shore and lit fires. Then at last they ate, and recovered their strength, lying on the grass and taking their fill of old wine and rich venison. When their hunger was satisfied and the remains of the feast removed, they talked at length about their missing comrades, not knowing whether to hope or fear, wondering whether they were still alive or whether at that very moment they were drawing their last breath and beyond all calling. Most of all did Aeneid, who loved his men, mourn to himself the long and eager Orestes, and Amycus, and the cruel death of Lycus, then brave Gaius, and brave Clothus. Now the feast was ended, and Jupiter was looking down from the height of heaven on the sea, flying with sails, and the land far beneath him, on the shores of the seas, and the far-spread people, when suddenly he stopped in his survey at the highest point of the sky, and fixed his eyes upon the kingdom of Libya. Even as he was turning over in his mind all the suffering that he had saw, his daughter Venus came to him, her shining eyes brimming with tears, and spoke with a sadness greater than his own. "You who rule the affairs of gods and men, with your eternal law, and at whose lightning we are all afraid, what great harm has my son Aeneas been able to do to you? What crime have the Trojans committed that they should suffer all the loss of life, and the whole world be closed to them for the sake of Italy? Did you not promise that with the rolling years there would come a time when from this stock the Romans would arise? From this blood of Teucer, recalled to Italian soil, there would come leaders of men who would hold power over every land and sea? Oh, Father, has some argument changed your mind? As for me, I used to console myself with this for the cruel fall and sack of Troy, by weighing one destiny against another. But unrelieved misfortune is now hounding these men from disaster to disaster. O great king, what end do you set to their labours? The Greeks were all around Antenor, but he escaped them, made his way safety into the Illyrian Gulf and the heartlands of the kingdom of the Liburnians, and then went beyond the mouth of Timorous. From there, with a great roar from inside the mountain, a sea of water bursts out of 9 mouths and covers the fields with sounding ocean. But in this place he founded the city of Patavium as a home for his Trojans, and gave them a name. There he dedicated the arms with which he fought at Troy, and there he now lives in settled peace and quiet. But as for us, your own children, to whom you grant a place in the citadel of heaven, we lose our ships. It is unspeakable. We are betrayed and kept far away from the shores of Italy, because there is one who hates us. Is this our reward for piety and obedience? Is this how you bring us to our kingdom? The father of gods and men, looking at his daughter with the smile that clears the sky and dispels the storms, kissed her lightly on the lips and said, "Spare yourself these fears, my lady of Cythera. You can be sure that the destiny of your descendants remains unchanged. We will see the city of Lavinium and its promised walls. You will take great-hearted Aeneid up to the stars of heaven. No argument changes my mind. But now, since this anxiety is gnawing at you, I shall tell you more, unrolling for you the secrets of the scroll of the fates. He will wage a great war in Italy and crush its fierce tribes. He will build walls for his people and establish their way of life until a third summer has seen him reigning in Latium, and a third winter has passed after the subjection of the Ritualans. But the reign of his son Ascanius, who now receives the second name, Ilias, shall last while the months of 30 long years revolve, and he shall transfer his kingdom from its seat at Lavinium and build a city with powerful fortifications at Alba Longa. Here the rule of the race of Hector will last for 300 long years. Ilia, the priestess queen, heavy with the seed of Mars, shall give birth to twin sons. Then Romulus shall receive the people, wearing with joy the tawny hide of the wolf which nursed him. The walls he will build will be the walls of Mars, and he shall give his own name to his people, the Romans. On them I impose no limits of time or place. I have given them an empire that will know no end. Even angry Juno, who is now wearying sea and land and sky with her terrors, will come to better counsel and join with me in cherishing the people of Rome, the rulers of the world, the race that wears the toga. So it has been decreed. There will come a day, as the years glide by, when the house of Assaracus will reduce Achilles' Pythia and glorious Mycenae to slavery, and will conquer and rule the city of Argos. From this noble stock there will be born a Trojan Caesar, to bound his empire by Oceanus at the limits of the world, and his fame by the stars. He will be called Julius, a name passed down to him from the great Ilias. In time to come, have no fear. You will receive him in the sky, laden with the spoils of the east. He too will be called upon in prayer. Then wars will be laid aside, and the years of bitterness will be over. Silver-haired Truth and Vesta and Romulus Quirinius, with his brother Remus, will sit dispensing justice. The dread gates of war with their tight fastenings of steel will then be closed, and godless strife will sit inside them on his murderous armour, roaring hideously from bloody mouth, hands shackled behind his back with 100 bands of bronze. So spoke Jupiter, and he sent down Mercury, the son of Maia, to make the lands and the citadel of the new city of Carthage hospitable to the Trojans, in case Dido, in her ignorance of destiny, should bar her country to them. Through the great expanse of air he flew, wielding his wings like oars, and soon alighted on the shores of Libya. There he lost no time in carrying out the commands of Jupiter, and in accordance with the divine will the Carthaginians laid aside their fiery temper. Most of all, the queen took into her heart a feeling of quiet and kindness towards the Trojans. But all that night the dutiful Aeneid was turning many things over in his mind. As soon as life-giving morning had come, he decided to go out and explore this new land and bring back to his men a true account of the shores to which the winds had driven them, and the beasts and the men that lived in it. But were there any men? for he saw no signs of cultivation. So, leaving his ships hidden in the wooded cove under the overhanging rocks, and shut in on every side by trees and quivering shade, he set out alone with Aeneid, gripping two broad-bladed steel spears in his hand. As he walked through the middle of the wood, his mother came to meet him, looking like a Spartan girl out hunting, wearing the dress of a Spartan girl and carrying her weapons. Or like the Thracian Harpalyce, as she wearies horses with her running and outstrips the swift current of the river Hebrus. She had a light bow hanging from her shoulders in hunting style. Her hair was unbound and streamy in the wind, and her flowing dress was caught up above the knee. "Hey there, soldier," she called out. "Do you happen to have seen one of my sisters wandering about here, or in full cry after a foaming boar? She was wearing a spotted lynx skin and had a quiver hanging from her belt." So spoke Venus, and Venus's son so began his reply. "I have never seen nor heard any of your sisters, but how am I to address a girl like you? Your face is not the face of a mortal, and you do not speak like a human being. Surely you must be a goddess. Are you Diana, sister of Apollo? Are you one of the sister nymphs? Be gracious to us, whoever you may be, and lighten our distress. Tell us what sky this is we find ourselves at last beneath, what shore of the world it is which we now wander, tossed here by the fury of wind and wave. We do not know the place. We do not know the people. Tell us, and many a victim will fall by my right hand before your altars." Venus replied, "I am sure I deserve no such honour. Tyrian girls all carry the quiver and wear purple boots with this high ankle binding. This is a Phoenician kingdom you are looking at. We are Tyrians. This is the city of the people of Agenor, but the land belongs to the Libyans, a race not easy to handle in war. Dido, who came from the city of Tyre to escape her brother, holds sway here. There was a crime a long time ago. It is a long winding story, but I shall trace its outlines for you. Her father had given her in marriage to Zacchaeus, the wealthiest of the Phoenicians. They were joined with all the due rights of a first marriage, and great was the love the poor queen bore for him. But the kingdom of Tyre was ruled by her brother Pygmalion, the vilest of criminals. A mad passion came between the two men. In blind lust for his gold, and godless Pygmalion attacked him without warning, ambushing him at the altar. With no fault for his sister's life, he killed Zacchaeus, and for a long time concealed what he had done. Dido was sick with love, and he deceived her with false hopes and empty pretences. But one night there appeared to her in a dream the very ghost of her unburied husband. He lifted up his face, pale with strange pallor of dead, and bearing the sword wounds on his breast, he pointed to the altar where he had been killed, and revealed the whole horror of the crime that had been hidden in their house. He then urged her to escape with all speed from their native land, and had to help her in her wandering. He showed her where to find an ancient treasure buried in the earth, an incalculable weight of silver and gold. This moved Dido to plan her escape and gather followers, men driven by savage hatred or lively fear of the tyrant. They seized some ships which happened to be ready for sea. They loaded them with gold and sailed away with the wealth that Pygmalion had coveted. The women led the whole undertaking, but when they arrived at the place where you will now see the great walls and rising citadel of the new city of Carthage, they bought a piece of land called the Byrsa, the animal's hide, as large an area as they could include within the hide of a bull. But now tell me, who are you? What country have you sailed from? Where are you making for? In reply to her question, Aeneid drew a great sigh from the bottom of his heart and said, "O goddess, if I were to start at the beginning and retrace our whole story, and if you had time to listen to the annals of our suffering, Before I finish, the doors of Olympus would close, and the evening star would lay the day to rest. We come from ancient city of Troy, if the name of Troy has ever reached your ears. We have sailed many seas, and by the chance of the winds we have been driven ashore here in Libya. I am Aeneas, known for my devotion. I carry with me on my ships the gods of my home, the Penates. Wrested from me my enemies, and my fame has reached beyond the skies. I am searching for my fatherland in Italy. My descent is from highest Jupiter. With my goddess mother to show the way, I embarked upon the Phrygian sea with 20 ships, following the destiny which had been given to me, and now a bare 7 of them remain, and these are torn to pieces by wind and wave. I am a helpless stranger, driven out of Europe and out of Asia, tramping the desert wastes of Libya.